US President-elect Donald Trump will be holding talks with President Obama in a few hours at the White House to discuss a smooth transition of power.
Not my president! Not my
But
president!
within hours of Mr. Trump's election, thousands have protested in cities across America, saying his views don't represent them. Fears at the UN that Mr. Trump is willing to pull out of climate change deals. We'll be looking at the president-elect's proposed policies on trade and law and order.
Also this lunchtime, the first victim of the tram crash in South London is named. 19-year-old Dane Chinner is among 7 people who died. Delays in discharging patients from hospitals reaches a record high for the NHS in England. Long queues at banks in India as some high-value notes are scrapped in a bid to tackle corruption.
Here in the south, calls for improved safety at a railway crossing in Aylesbury after a cyclist is hit by a train. And the graduates going back to the classroom, a new way of recruiting teachers.
A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the BBC News at 1 live from Washington, where in a few hours' time, President-elect Donald Trump will be holding talks with the man he will be replacing, President Barack Obama, at the White House. Here, they'll discuss the smooth transition of power. But within hours after Mr. Trump's victory at the polls, thousands of people took to the streets to protest in cities right across America, saying that he was not their president, that he did not represent their views. Let's get the latest now from Laura Bicker.
We reject the president-elect!
These are the voices of voters who do not accept the result.
Reject the president-elect!
In New York, thousands marched to Trump Tower. Angry and anxious from coast to coast, they came with the same cry. In Los Angeles, they burned an effigy of Donald Trump, gathering round the fire. In Seattle, they paraded down highways. And in the nation's capital, emotions ran high.
America was built on genocide and blood.
Yo. We love your
I can't understand how someone who is so misogynistic could be elected to be president of the United States. And it's been a horrible day. It was a horrible night. It's just been a horrible past few months, and we want Trump out.
I accept that he is president, but I want him to, as he was trying to say at some points last night, to unite America and to unite behind the ideals that maybe he didn't initially support. I don't think he's been really concrete in anything he's said so far in his campaign. And at this point, he needs to represent the entire America.
This is awful. And even though we can't change anything, it feels good to stand together with my brothers, my sisters, with people that share my beliefs, and let everyone know that we are not okay with this.
Donald Trump announced in his victory speech that he would be a president for all Americans, and his supporters say this is what the US voted for.
They have a right to protest, but let's look at what they're protesting. They're protesting democracy. Democracy was at work. Democracy is what played out.
But Mr. Trump's campaign did cause controversy and division even within his own party, a Republican rift that now appears to be healing.
Donald Trump heard a voice out in this country that no one else heard. He connected in ways with people no one else did. He turned politics on its head. And now, Donald Trump will lead a unified Republican government.
With the Republicans in control, Donald Trump could be a powerful president. In his first 100 days, he wants to deport illegal immigrants and build a wall with Mexico, repeal President Obama's landmark Health Care Act, which provides affordable health care to millions. He's repeatedly denied humans have caused climate change and pledges to roll back on recent emission-cutting reforms. Donald Trump will step into the White House for the first time later as president-elect. And to be a fly on the wall for that first meeting between him and President Obama. The two have shared nothing but hostilities over the last few years, but this is the beginning of a 70-day transition of power as Donald Trump begins to take the reins of a divided nation. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Washington.
Well, as you can imagine, there is a lot of speculation about what a Trump presidency might look like, what policies he's likely to prioritize. In a few moments, we'll talk about his views on the environment. But first, let's talk to our legal affairs correspondent, Clive Coleman, in London. Clive, the big question as far as law and order is concerned is the makeup of the Supreme Court. 9 justices, there is 1 seat vacant at the moment, and there could be another one in the next couple of years. Why is this so important?
Well, as you say, I mean, the American Supreme Court, I'm outside the UK version, which is far less powerful. The American Supreme Court is designed to be one of the 3 equally powerful branches of government, along with Congress and the US President, and its job is to protect the United States Constitution, and that includes declaring which rights are and which aren't constitutional. Mr. Trump has made it clear that he wants a justice to fill that vacant seat who is conservative, someone who will reverse the decision in 1973, Roe versus Wade, which established the right to abortion across the United States, someone who will row back on gay marriage, someone who will be conservative in protecting laws on gun ownership and be conservative on immigration. As you say, 1 vacant seat which would give a conservative majority. But of the 4 liberal justices currently serving, 2 are pretty old, Clive. 1 is 78 and 1 is 83. Now, if they go and conservative justices are appointed in their stead, then that really could mean that the face of the law on some of the most contentious issues, gay marriage, abortion, in American society, the face of the law on those issues could change for a generation. It's a major appointment and a major issue for Mr. Trump.
Indeed, Clive Coleman in London. Thanks, Clive. Well, one other controversial aspect of the Trump presidency could be his views on the environment. As far as climate change is concerned, he believes it's not man-made, and he made it clear on the campaign trail that he believes it's all a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese to hurt US manufacturing, and he's also pledged to pull America out of the recent Paris Climate Change Accord. And Mr. Trump is also a friend of the coal industry. Let's get some more on this now from our environment analyst, Roger Harrigan.
Crowning the new King Coal. Donald Trump at a pre-election miners' rally. In coal states, the economy's been hit as coal slumped. Mr. Trump says he'll scrap the plan to clean up power stations that President Obama promised the world. It's not even clear if he accepts the science of climate change. He once tweeted, "The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make US manufacturing non-competitive."
We are all standing together for climate justice.
At the UN's annual climate conference in Morocco, environmentalists are fearful about a Trump presidency. In the conference hall, delegates restated their own commitment to curbing the emissions that are changing the climate. But they worry about Mr. Trump's threat to withdraw from the UN's global climate deal.
If he withdraws, it means everything is going backwards and it will not be good for the world.
I'm not worried, but aware that our work is cut out for us. Like, this is not going to be a walk in the park, but we're up for the challenge, and we think that we have history, momentum, and the world on our side.
What's more, if Mr. Trump loosens rules on American coal, it may not help the industry much. Shale gas is proving attractive. Will investors put money into coal?
I think that they're going to be feeling that Trump is only a 4-year experience, and then after that things will change back again. And so they're not going to really let it rip, because it may come back to bite them on the behind if they take advantage of, any general loosening in the short term.
Another factor, a clean energy revolution in the United States is creating a jobs boom. The cost of wind power and solar power is plummeting. Will Mr. Trump want to risk that business? One clue to a Trump presidency comes from the time he dropped in to visit his golf course in Scotland. Some politicians warned the course would damage the fragile sand dunes there. Mr. Trump said he'd take his jobs away unless the course was approved. He won. Roger Harrabin, BBC News.
Well, Mr. Trump has made no secret of his America First policy when it comes to trade. And for some people, that simply means protectionism. But what could it mean for Britain in a post-Brexit world? Here's Christian Fraser.
In his first speech as the president-elect yesterday, Donald Trump said America's going to have some very special relationships with other countries. But clearly there's something in the trade deals the United States has with the outside world that irritates him and irritates millions of workers who voted for him. So let's have a look at some of the problems he highlighted. He said a third of US manufacturing jobs have been lost since 1994, since the United States signed a trade deal with Canada and Mexico, known as NAFTA. 50,000 factories have closed, he said, since China joined the World Trade Organization. And he said we have an $800 billion trade deficit in goods, half of which he blames on China. Now, in his campaign literature, there was a 7-point plan on trade. I'm not going to spell it all out, but here are some of the key bits. And quite obviously, he's going to look at the one trade deal that is still on the table and still to be ratified. It's known as the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It includes 12 countries, including Japan, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand, among others. He's also going to take another closer look at NAFTA, this deal between Canada and Mexico. If we don't like what we see, he says, then we're going to pull out of it. And obviously, there is going to be quite a hard line on China. They'll look at currency manipulation. They'll look at subsidies for manufacturers within China. And they'll probably look at tariffs again for things that are coming into the United States of America. But the question we're all asking here in the UK is, what about Brexit? What about our trade deal with the United States? Well, Barack Obama, of course, said that we'd be at the back of the queue, but Donald Trump's quite different. He has a hotel in Scotland. He applauded the Brexit decision. And earlier this year, he said, you'd certainly not be at the back of the queue, that I can tell you, which is music to the ears for the UK Chancellor, Philip Hammond.
We look forward to working with the new US administration. We have very strong and close ties with the United States, and as we begin the process of negotiating our exit from the European Union, of course we will want to talk to the Americans about future opportunities for deepening our trade links.
And it certainly matters, because the United States is the UK's single biggest export partner. We send them fancy cars, crude oil, gas turbines. It's worth altogether around £40 billion. So the UK can only hope that the special relationship is worth more than the inward-looking protectionist rhetoric that we heard during the campaign.
Christian Fraser there. Well, that meeting between President-elect and the President will take place in the next couple of hours or so. I'm sure on the face of it, there'll be all smiles and there'll be handshakes and so on, but make no mistake, these two men do not like each other. Mr. Trump certainly believes President Obama has been a failure in the job, and on the campaign, President Obama has made it clear that he thinks Mr. Trump isn't qualified, doesn't have the temperament to be commander-in-chief. But everyone is expecting all that will be put to one side for a smooth transition of power. Now back to you.
Now, in other news here, the first victim of yesterday's tram crash in Croydon has been named. Dane Chinnery, who was 19, is among 7 people to have died. Investigators are still trying to determine what caused the tram to derail. The driver, who had been held on suspicion of manslaughter, was released today on bail. Our correspondent Emma Simpson is in Croydon for us now. Emma.
The carriages are lying on their side, just a short distance up the road from here. These are the first fatalities on board a tram for nearly 50 years, and a lot of questions to be answered. Did the driver fall asleep at the wheel? One survivor said the driver told him he'd blacked out. Could there have been a mechanical failure or other factors? That's what investigators are now trying to establish. The tram, which came off the tracks, still on its side. Investigators believe it was going too fast round this bend. The question is why? And the painstaking search for clues continues, with a host of teams on the ground. 19-year-old Dane Chinnery was one of the 7 people who died.
They kept phoning and he wouldn't answer his phone.
Barbara Dumbleton, a close family friend, knew him well.
Always had a smile on his face. He was a beautiful lad.
Yeah.
Absolutely lovely. He was on the tram. I mean, my son, I phoned him up to see if he was all right. He said, I just missed that one, Mum.
Here in New Addington, the place where Dane lived, they still can't believe what's happened.
It's like a community out there. It's like a little island, and everybody feels the same. You know, they're all really sad about the whole thing.
It's devastating, to be honest with you. People just going to work, say goodbye, go out in the morning, they've gone. It's really, really upsetting. We've seen it on the television, and we all know that corner, and they do go too fast around that corner.
This is where the tram began its journey. Some services are running today. Thousands of commuters use this every day, a system which has a good safety record. This is what the journey looks like from the cab of the tram, the same route on a different day. Investigators believe it was going at a significantly higher speed than the 12-mile-per-hour limit.
There is a system on a tram which is called the dead man's control, so the driver is constantly pressing a button. If he doesn't do so, the brakes come on. The detailed inquiry now going on in Croydon will show us what impact, if any, that may have had. But it's important to remember that a tram is really more of a bus on rails than it is a rail vehicle.
The consequences have been horrific. As flowers were laying close to the scene, the driver was released on police bail after being questioned. The stranded tram may be removed later today as investigations continue. Not only did 7 people lose their lives here, more than 50 people were injured. We've had a short update this morning from St George's Hospital in Tooting, where 3 passengers who were seriously injured have now been operated on and are continuing to be looked after by medical staff.
Okay, Emma, thank you. The latest figures show the NHS in England is continuing to miss some of its key targets. Levels of delays for getting patients out of hospital have reached their highest level for the 3rd month in a row. Targets for cancer treatment, ambulance response times and routine operations were also missed. Well, our health editor Hugh Pym joins us. But to say this doesn't sound good appears to be an understatement, Hugh.
Well, that's right, Kate. A number of key targets missed yet again. That's been going on month for some time now for the NHS in England. But the NHS itself is saying some of its problems are caused by the fact that it can't shift patients out of hospital beds back into the community, even though they are fit to be transferred. So the latest figures out today show that for September, there were just over 196,000 bed days lost because patients were in them and couldn't be moved, so they weren't available to new patients. And that was up a really pretty astonishing 33% over the year. Now, one of the problems is social care has suffered funding cuts in England. That's meant there's often not a social care package available at home, so patients have to stay in hospitals. And the NHS leadership is saying they're doing the best they can to accommodate patients who come in through the front door and who come in for routine operations, but often the beds just aren't available, and that causes further delays. And there's mounting pressure now on the government to address this social care issue, to put more money in, possibly in the autumn statement, because many NHS and social care leaders in local authorities in England are saying it's really reaching crisis point. It's an issue that needs to be dealt with. Never mind the fact that you've got the winter ahead with yet more demand for care likely throughout hospitals.
Of course. OK, Hugh, thank you. The time then is now 19 minutes past 1 and our main story this lunchtime. Protests in cities across the US hours before Donald Trump meets Barack Obama for their first talks on the handover of power. And still to come, England pile up the runs on the day of the first Test match against India.
In South today at 1:30, the graduates making the grade, a new way of recruiting teachers, and the artists changing attitudes to disability with their designs in a shop window.
Now, long queues have formed outside banks in India after the government scrapped 500 and 1,000 rupee notes. It says it's replacing the notes as part of a crackdown on tax avoidance and fraud. But it's causing hardship for many people who depend on the cash economy for their living. As our correspondent Yogita Lemay now reports from Mumbai.
Tempers are beginning to flare. These people have already been in queue for more than 3 hours now. Carrying currency notes, the government suddenly banned on Tuesday night. They've come to the bank to exchange them. A lucky few have got inside. Bipin Parekh is desperate to withdraw some money.
It's my grandson's birthday today and I want to buy him something. But I had no valid currency notes, so I had to come here to get some.
People have been given 50 days until the 30th of December this year to exchange or deposit their old currency notes. But there are also limits set on how much cash they can withdraw or exchange, at least over the next few weeks. It's a move aimed at cracking down on illegal cash holdings and fake currency notes, but it's caught people off guard. Some banks have run out of new currency notes already. That's added to the chaos. And while the execution is being criticized, the plan itself seems to have found support.
Move is good, but difficulty for people, it's less time is given.
The benefits what we are going to get from this thing what Mr. Modi has done, like the black money and stuff like that. So I don't mind waiting in line or whatever. Eventually that's my money, that is what he's going to save.
Let us join this festival of integrity and credibility.
In his address to the nation on Tuesday, Prime Minister Modi called it a grand sacrifice for the country.
Let us fight corruption and black money. Let us ensure that the nation's wealth benefits the poor.
It's the boldest crackdown this country has seen on unaccounted for cash. And it's never been as hard for anyone who's trying to evade tax. Yogita Lemay, BBC News, Mumbai.
The High Court has ruled that the NHS in England should consider funding a drug used in preventing HIV/AIDS. NHS England had argued that preventing the spread of HIV was the responsibility of local health authorities. But this morning, 3 High Court judges disagreed in a decision that's been called a game changer. Here's our health correspondent, Sophie Hutchinson.
Campaigners leaving court after a key win in the battle for the HIV drug PrEP to be available on the NHS. Health service bosses lost their argument that only local authorities could provide the treatment.
We're absolutely delighted to have been vindicated a second time, and it couldn't be any clearer that NHS England has the power to commission PrEP. And at a time when 17 people a day are acquiring HIV, we really urge them now to just move forward and look at the evidence for how effective PrEP is, how cost effective it is, and make a balanced and fair decision to try and make it available as soon as possible to the people who need it.
PrEP has been described as a game-changer drug. It's a daily pill which has been shown to give gay men at high risk of HIV more than 80% protection. It works by preventing the virus from spreading through the body. But at £400 a month for a private prescription in the UK, PrEP is expensive. Dr. Will Nutland advises people on how to get it more cheaply from places such as India.
We know that thousands of people have been sourcing PrEP online from generic pharmacies, and that costs about £45 to £50 a month. I've been in touch with people who say, I really can't afford that, and that set up huge health inequalities.
Reacting to the court's judgment, NHS England said it will now formally consider whether to fund PrEP and where patients might get it. It also said we will immediately ask the drug manufacturer to reconsider its currently proposed excessively high pricing and will also explore options for using generics. Included in this judgment today is strong criticism from the judges of the public bodies in this case, the NHS, local government, the Health Secretary, for what is described as a bureaucratic squabble and for spending taxpayers' money on expensive lawyers rather than sorting out the dispute themselves. It's estimated up to 14,000 people could be eligible for PrEP in England. There would be more in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Health officials there will monitor NHS England closely to see if it will indeed pay for this drug. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
Now, a British financial trader who was extradited to the US last month is being allowed to return to the UK on bail after a court appearance in Chicago. Navinder Singh Sarawa admitted helping to trigger a so-called flash crash on Wall Street in 2010. It wiped around $1 trillion off the value of shares. He was told he can expect a jail sentence of at least 6 years. Well, our economics correspondent Andy Verity has been following the case and he's with me. Just remind us some of the details and the background to this, first of all, then, Andy.
OK, it's an astonishing story. You're talking about a 37-year-old with severe Asperger's syndrome who every day around about 2010 through to 2014 would get up late and from the bedroom of his parents' home in the under the Heathrow flight path in Hounslow would play the Chicago futures market from his computer. And he was brilliant at it, so brilliant that he made $40 million. The US says, of course, by fraudulent means. So the most remarkable thing about it is the Chicago futures market, not only had he never been there, it's very computerized. And human beings have very little chance on the Chicago futures market. If, say, you wanted to buy 1,000 shares in BP, as soon as you hit the buy key, within milliseconds, high-frequency trading programs would pick up your buy order, hoover up all the shares, bid up the price, and you'd end up having to pay more for it. So that's what happens in the futures market there. But he worked out that this made the markets twitchy. So if you pretended you'd had lots of sell orders, the market would go down, or if you pretended you were going to buy lots of stuff, the market would go up. So what he was effectively doing, what he's admitted to, is placing pretend orders that he never really meant to go through with, so that the market would move in his direction and he could make money. And he's likely to get about 6 to 8 years. Now he's pleaded guilty to wire fraud and spoofing, which is what I've just described. He'll be at home for now, but he's likely to spend that time in the US prison.
OK, Andy, thank you. Now, there's been a big rise in the number of complaints about the standard of care elderly people get at home. There were nearly 3,000 complaints made to the local government ombudsman last year over issues like care staff turning up late or cancelling visits. That's an increase of 25%. There were also complaints about residential care homes. The Department of Health says it's making it easier for complaints now, though, to be resolved. A man's died and another is in a serious but stable condition after a gas leak at a brewery in Northampton. Emergency services were called to the Carlsberg factory yesterday afternoon. 22 people, including 11 members of staff, 2 police officers and 9 firefighters, were taken to hospital following the ammonia leak. The population of golden eagles is thriving in Scotland, with numbers up by 15% over the past decade. Latest figures show there are now 508 pairs of the bird of prey, compared with nearly 450 in the last survey. Conservationists say increased monitoring and tagging are proving to be effective deterrents against illegal activity. Now, England have taken a commanding lead on day 2 of the first Test match against India. They made 537 all out in their first innings. In reply, India was 63 without loss. Here's our sports correspondent, Joe Wilson.
Even the police in Rajkot smiled as they chanted. It takes humour to watch when India are down. In the morning session, it was England's Moeen Ali, reaching the landmark every batsman aspires to, the century. When Mo was gone, Ben Stokes took over. Nothing he likes more than a chance to attack.
Oh, well played.
So in the afternoon, it was Stokes who benefited from India's errant fielding as well as his own ambition, who went past 100. Now recall Joe Root had done that on Wednesday, so England had 3 century makers in the same innings, only the second time ever they'd done that playing in Asia. Serious batting.
Definitely, I mean, especially against their bowlers, really, who are obviously world-class spinners, and they've got some very good seamers as well, so it was good. To keep them out in the field for almost 2 days was brilliant as well, so we're really happy. Obviously, we've got a job to do tomorrow. We don't want to be on the same receiving end.
When Ben Stokes was finally out, the bowler just about found enthusiasm to smile. Stokes summoned the strength to walk to the dressing room. Even if England made 537, he will still find energy to wave that flag. To win the match, England now need wickets. Stuart Broad's playing in his 100th Test match. If only they were all in Nottingham. Batting looks straightforward in Rajkot. Who'd be a fast bowler, Stuart? Spin bowling requires less physical strength. Catchers must be on their toes. That's Ben Stokes tumbling. Now careful getting up. Ouch. Cramp? Well, he'd been busy. England have 3 spinners in the team.
Oh, great delivery.
Adil Rashid is one. India 63 at the close. No wickets down. Not quite. Nice battle. See you tomorrow. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
The Duke of Edinburgh and Prince Harry have visited the Field of Remembrance at Westminster Abbey. They met soldiers and members of the public for the official opening of the memorial, which honours and remembers those who lost their lives serving in the armed forces. OK, it's time for a look at the weather. We're joined now by Louise Lear. Hello.
Hi there, Kate. Well, a Remembrance Sunday forecast coming up at the end of this forecast, so keep watching. But just take a look at this glorious photograph from the Highlands earlier on today. Not a cloud in the sky. The weather is slowly improving this week. There's some threatening-looking cloud around as well, and a rainbow coming through across parts of Lancaster, and that is because of the northwesterly winds. It's just driving in plenty of showers down through the North Channel along that Cheshire Gap in particular. So further showers are not out of the question for the rest of the afternoon. But it's sunny spells and scattered showers for many of us. If you dodge them, not faring too badly at all. And with that northwesterly breeze, it does tend to funnel the clouds into pretty organised bands of showers. Now, I'll just point that out to you in just a moment. So if we take a look at 4 o'clock this afternoon, there's the potential for some sharper showers down into the southwest. Having said that, temperatures here are into double figures, so it's a little bit warmer than recent days. We could see highs of around 10 to 12 degrees. A few showers down into the South Midlands, and you can see in between some sunshine coming through, but through the Isle of Man down towards the Cheshire Gap, that's where we're likely to see some persistent showers funneling for the rest of the afternoon. Not looking too bad, though, through Northern Ireland and into Scotland. Some blue sky and sunshine for the rest of the day, but those clear skies by day, well, they'll be rather telling again through the night. Temperatures are going to fall away, and perhaps in sheltered areas of Scotland, Northern Ireland, maybe northwest England, we could see lows down to -3 or -4 degrees. So a cold, frosty start here. Elsewhere, mist and fog could be an issue. It is going to be a cold start generally through the country, but some of that fog may be freezing in places, some of it fairly patchy and dense. So it's certainly worth bearing in mind. That could cause some issues if you're going to be out on the roads early on. It will steadily lift, and actually Friday is shaping up to be a reasonable day. Dry with some sunshine coming through. The wind's starting to strengthen by the end of the day. A weather front arrives into Northern Ireland by the afternoon, but ahead of it in the sunshine, temperatures again still struggling at around 7 or 8 degrees. But some wet and windy weather arrives for the start of the weekend. So for the first half of the weekend, a little bit disappointing. That rain pushes its way from west to east. It will clear out towards western areas, but linger, I think, through much of eastern England, not only through the day on Saturday, but potentially first thing on Sunday morning. So Remembrance morning may well start off a little damp and drizzly in the southeast corner, but hopefully brightening up. Chilly start for many of us generally, but some decent sunny spells around on Sunday. The most important thing is it looks as though Remembrance Sunday mostly dry. Kate.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Louise. And before we leave you then, just a reminder of our main story this lunchtime. There have been protests in cities across the United States hours before Donald Trump meets Barack Obama for their first talks on the handover of power. That's all from the BBC News at 1. Goodbye from me and the team here on BBC One. We'll join the BBC's news teams where you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.